I am third-hand goods. The first mother abandoned me in a trash can because I was a girl. The second mother ran off with a wealthy man after divorcing my father. The third mother saw me scavenging for leftovers in a landfill and, gritting her teeth, took me away with her. She raised me for 10 years. Yet just before my college entrance exams, she suddenly picked up a knife and viciously slashed at my face in a moment of rebirth. I returned to the instant she raised the knife high. I leaned my face forward on my own die. I opened my eyes and saw my stepmother raising a knife high, bringing it down toward my face. This scene felt so familiar, exactly the same as in my countless midnight dreams. No one knew why she would do this. Although my stepmother was strict and nagging, she would make delicious braised pork for me. My brother always liked to bully me, but when someone called me a bastard, he would rush forward and beat that person until they were spitting teeth. I used to think that even without blood ties, we were a loving family, until this day in my past life. That day was the Chinese language exam for the college entrance exam. My alarm didn't go off, and I woke up from nervousness. I groggily rubbed my eyes, only to see my stepmother standing by my bed, staring straight at me. Mom, I looked at her, feeling inexplicably afraid. She smiled at me, the scars on her face looking even more hideous. She reached out her hand. I thought she was going to pinch my cheek as usual, but she suddenly tightened her grip, covering my mouth firmly. Mom, my startled cry turned into a muffled, desperate whimper. I struggled with all my might, but it became difficult to even breathe. I saw that she was holding a knife in her hand. She smiled at me and said, "Once it's cut, it'll be fine. Be good, it won't hurt." In that moment, her ferocious appearance was like a yiksha. My tears flowed uncontrollably. I cried out in anguish, "Mom." She froze for a moment, biting her lip tightly. The next moment, she took a deep breath, and the sharp knife in her hand still grazed my cheek. This incident became the greatest regret of my life. Later, I became a successful female entrepreneur. Everyone says that if it weren't for the scar on my cheek, I could have made it in the entertainment industry. No one knows why my stepmother did what she did. After all, she and I share no blood ties. Yet she saved me from dire straits and raised me for so long. I know why, but for now, do you think I raised you for nothing? I only want to sell you for money. That face of yours, keeping it will only bring disaster. Just like in my past life, my stepmother roared at me, the knife in her hand slashing down. But this time, I did not dodge. Instead, I took the initiative to meet it head-on. A piercing pain made cold sweat pour down my back, and my stepmother's knife fell to the ground. In a daze, I recalled my entire life. Born into poverty, the achievements I had attained in my previous life came only after enduring countless hardships. I have a nickname, third-hand goods, because I've been abandoned twice. The first to abandon me was my biological mother. She had already given birth to 3 daughters in a row, and when she saw I was another girl, she threw me in the trash. Before I froze to death, I was picked up and taken home by my uncle, who had rushed over upon hearing the news. "What a sin! If you don't want this fine girl, I'll take her," my uncle said. My aunt and uncle had a huge argument, and she didn't want me at first, but my uncle said a girl could bring a brother, which swayed my aunt, who had yet to bear a child. Unfortunately, by the time I was 5, my aunt's belly still hadn't swollen. Gossip, like a hen that can't lay eggs, and barren land, made her irritable, and she felt I was eating the family's food for nothing. Not daring to argue with them, my aunt took her anger out on me. She made me, a 5-year-old, learn to cook and wash dishes. In the bitter cold of deep winter, I had to wash her clothes. If they weren't clean enough, I'd get a beating. My aunt would shove my head into a basin of water, or make me strip naked and kneel in the snow. My own parents wished me dead, so naturally they never came to see me. I desperately longed for my uncle to come home. My uncle was a carpenter who made a living with his skills and often went out to work. He was very good to me. If he saw me getting beaten, he would get angry. I don't remember how many times he argued with my aunt for my sake, but unfortunately, he backed down every time. He said somewhat sheepishly that if only he had money, things would be better. Sometimes, he would secretly buy me a stick of candied hawthorn and tell me not to tell my aunt. I took big bites of the candied hawthorn, thinking it was the most delicious thing in the world. When I was 6 years old, I burned the rice, and my aunt slapped me so hard that I lost hearing in one ear. My usually mild-tempered uncle gave my aunt a slap in return. The next day, she ran away, saying she had long been fed up with such a poor life. From that day on, my uncle stopped working, smoking through the night until he coughed incessantly. Everyone says that a household without a woman can never truly manage to get by. Even though I could do the laundry and cook, the aunties in the village introduced several women to my uncle. Unfortunately, for some reason, none of them worked out in the end. Uncle grew thinner and thinner, and he took to drinking. When he got drunk, he would stare at me with a fixed, intense gaze. His eyes were bloodshot, so terrifying that I even began to miss the days when my aunt used to beat me. I timidly called out to him, "Dad." I had always called him that. He remained silent, gently touching my face with his rough and cold palm. Finally, one day, my uncle woke up early. He offered to take me to the town to play, and I was overjoyed. I love going to the town market the most. I can never get enough of it. My uncle bought me my favorite candied hawthorn skewer and said he was going to buy some pork, asking me to wait for him for a while, but I waited in the wind for a long time, and he never came. I couldn't hold back any longer and took a bite of the candied hawthorn, only to find that the hawthorn was spoiled. I think I'll never like candied hawthorn skewers again. That day, I don't know how many people were staring at me. Finally, an old scavenger said I was his granddaughter and wanted to take me away. He picked me up and ran. He reeked worse than a pigsty. I was so terrified, crying and struggling desperately, but I couldn't break free at all. The old man shouted in my ear, "Your dad doesn't want you anymore." Furious, I bit him. "Brat." He slapped me viciously and was about to hit me again when my uncle arrived. My uncle chased him away, then held me tightly and said in a very low voice, "I'm sorry. I have poor hearing in one ear and didn't catch it clearly." He repeated it again. I didn't know why he was apologizing. He had bought me candied hawthorn skewers after all, so I wiped away his tears and said, "Dad, come pick me up earlier next time." Uncle nodded vigorously. When I grew up, I learned that my uncle didn't want me back then, but he was an honest man, and in the end, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Fortunately, half a year later, my stepmother came into the family. I heard that my stepmother was from the city, but she was very ugly and had a son, which was why she could never find a partner. Tsk. With a stepmother comes a stepfather. Your days ahead will be tough. Your dad doesn't want you anymore. Everyone said that stepmothers were never any good. They would not let the children eat, forcing them to do household chores and denying them the chance to go to school. The night before my stepmother arrived, I cried quietly all night long. I thought, my aunt wouldn't let me eat either. Once my stepmother comes, I'll probably starve to death. So, on the day I was to meet my stepmother, my eyes were swollen. I never expected that my stepmother wouldn't be ugly at all. She was exceptionally tall, with very fair skin and large eyes. However, there was a long knife scar on her left cheek, which looked quite frightening. I saw her walking towards me and instinctively closed my eyes. I was afraid she would hit me, but she just patted my head and then asked my uncle in shock, "Why is your girl so thin?" My uncle was a bit embarrassed. "She's a picky eater." My uncle was lying. When my aunt was around, I often didn't get enough to eat. After my aunt ran away, there was no food left at home, so I could only eat corn on the cob with my uncle. I'm not picky at all. I clearly love everything. The brother my stepmother brought with her stuck his tongue out at me from behind her. "Ugly freak." "Jason, don't make me slap you," my stepmother said coldly. My brother immediately shut his mouth, where my stepmother couldn't see. He still mouthed the words, "ugly freak," at me, but I wasn't angry, because he only scolded me, which was far better than the children in the village who called me third-hand goods and threw stones at me. Uncle prepared 4 dishes and a soup, including braised pork, a rare treat. In previous years, I would only get a piece during the new year. I was so greedy, staring intently at the braised pork, but I remembered what everyone said. Stepmothers never let their children eat their fill, so I didn't dare touch it. Uncle was too caught up in his joy, constantly serving my stepmother and brother, completely unaware of me. I watched the braised pork belly dwindling away, nearly on the verge of tears. At that moment, my stepmother glanced at me a few times, so I shouldn't have been staring at the braised pork belly. After all, remembering how my aunt would scold me as a money-losing burden whenever I ate meat, I hurriedly put down my chopsticks. Then my stepmother stopped looking at me. At night, I was too hungry to sleep. I felt as if my entire body had been hollowed out, my stomach aching so badly. My Mind completely consumed by the 5 pieces of braised pork left over from dinner, I went to the kitchen, intending to eat some rice, but I couldn't help staring at the cold braised pork, now covered in a layer of white congealed fat. I swallowed hard, just one bite. Surely it wouldn't be noticed. Summoning my courage, I took a small bite. The meat jelly was so rich, but the braised pork was so delicious. I couldn't help but take bite after bite, until the entire piece was gone. How did I finish it all? I was so scared I wanted to cry, and just then I ran into my stepmother getting up in the middle of the night. She looked at me in shock. "What are you doing?" Because I was too scared. I didn't hear clearly and didn't know what to say. I bit my lip hard and finally burst into tears. As I wiped my tears, she noticed the scars on my hand. My stepmother grabbed my wrist and asked me what had happened, whether my uncle had hit me. Timidly, I shook my head and said it was my former aunt who had done it. Then, I said, "Mom, I'm sorry, my ears aren't good. I didn't mean to not understand what you said. I'll definitely eat less and not make you angry." She looked at me for a long time, then at the braised pork in the bowl, and finally let out a long sigh. "Don't eat it cold." My stepmother lit the firewood, reheated the braised pork for me, and handed me 2 plump, white steamed buns. I didn't dare to eat, but she shouted loudly in my ear, "Eat, from now on, eat as much as you can, as long as I have a bite, you'll have one too." I had never eaten 5 pieces of braised pork belly all at once before, so I thought she was the best mother in the world, but it seemed like I was the only one who felt that way. Unlike my aunt, who enjoys playing mahjong and chatting about family matters, my stepmother was not well liked. She was so fierce. You never knew what cutting words might come from her thin lips. My uncle was a kind-hearted man, often having his wages withheld by others, but he felt too embarrassed to ask for them since they were all neighbors. But my stepmother had no such qualms. After she married into the family, she found out that my uncle had no savings and flew into a rage. She had a huge fight with my uncle, accusing him of marriage fraud. I thought she would be so angry that she would leave, but the next day, she took the bills and went door to door to collect debts. Some people, unable to save face, gave her the money. Some also said, since even her uncle didn't ask for money, what right did she, a mere woman, have to demand it? I saw my stepmother take a deep breath, her face calm as she cursed from his ancestors all the way down to his children's children, sending the man fleeing in panic. I watched quietly, too terrified to even speak, and then my brother grabbed me by the hair. He whispered in my ear with a grin, "My mom's pretty tough, huh? You're in for it now." I was scared by my brother, so I rushed to do the dishes that evening. My stepmother didn't say anything, but the next day, when she saw me about to wash the dishes again, she finally asked me what was going on. I was too timid to speak, and my brother said sarcastically, "Of course she's afraid you'll hit her, Jason." The stepmother raised her hand to hit my brother, but he didn't move. Instinctively, I knelt down. As usual, I said, "Mom, I'm sorry." The stepmother looked at me in shock, then at the bruises on my body, and suddenly understood something. She rubbed her head, seemingly unsure of what to do, then gave my brother a hard knock. She snatched the bowl from my hands. "Kids shouldn't do chores. These are grown-up things. Don't make a mess for me." The village had always been short on gossip, so my stepmother's fierceness quickly became famous. Everyone said my uncle was in for a tough time, having married a shrew. He'd never be able to hold his head up again. Some even whispered with knowing looks that back when she worked at a factory in the city, my stepmother had been notorious for being loose. She's been involved with countless men, and no one knows whose child her son really is. She only married into the countryside and settled for my uncle after being beaten by the first wife. I don't believe a word they say, even though my stepmother is fierce. I know she's a good person. I really like her. Uncle also liked her very much. Uncle spent more and more time at home, occasionally picking a cotton flower from the fields as a gift for my stepmother. Stepmother would mutter, "What's the use of this thing? It's not even edible." But when she turned away, her face would clearly flush, and even the scar on her face seemed to fade. I thought we were the best family until my uncle became addicted to gambling. Actually, my uncle had always loved playing cards, but his previous wife had taken all his money, so even if he wanted to play, he could only itch with desire. My stepmother didn't take his money. She just said that everyone's money should be kept together, and they should inform each other when they needed to use it. She never imagined that many men simply cannot be trusted with money. With some extra money in his pocket, my uncle started gambling. At first, it was just small amounts, but the stakes grew larger and larger. In the end, he lost all his savings and even fell into debt when he couldn't even afford to buy me a school bag and shamefully admitted he had gambled it all away. My stepmother flew into a rage. She smashed everything in the house that could be smashed, grabbed her brother, and was about to leave, while her uncle knelt down, begging her not to go. He kept slapping himself in the face, saying he would never gamble again. Uncle had always been smooth-tongued and knew how to humble himself. I saw that, even though my stepmother's eyes were red with anger, she still forgave my uncle. They were sweet for a while, but my uncle still couldn't control his hands. I don't know how many times they argued. Whenever I went out, someone would stop me. "Sonny, your parents are getting a divorce. Do you want to go with your dad or your mom?" People always asked me that, and every time, I would answer without getting tired of it, "Mom." When the adults heard my answer, they would give a subtle smile, as if I had said something foolish. "Silly girl, your stepmother won't want you. She's just like your previous aunt. She'll run off with another man." How many men do you think that bitch had before? Is that bastard child the factory manager's? Who knows? Sigh. Why did he have to disfigure her when he caught her cheating? I couldn't understand what they were saying, and my heart felt heavy with anxiety. I was just a child, powerless to do anything. I watched helplessly as their relationship grew worse and the atmosphere at home became increasingly oppressive. One day, while I was still doing my homework, someone suddenly kicked the door open. When those people came to the house to move things, my stepmother pulled out a knife, but when she saw the IOU, her hand dropped weakly, and tears slowly fell. Why am I so unlucky to have met this gambler? Tears flowed over the scar on her face, and she wiped them away forcefully. She wearily let them take our family's television, the bedding, packed up the luggage, and left with my brother. I instinctively wanted to follow, but my stepmother told me to stay put. I watched helplessly as they boarded the bus. My brother looked at me from the window, anxiously saying, "Mom, Sonny hasn't come up yet." "Shut up, she's not my child. She has an uncle, and her own father and mother. It's not my place to take care of her." It was strange, but this time, I heard it particularly clearly. I watched helplessly as my stepmother left with my brother, not chasing after them. Alone at home, I looked at the mess all around, curled up into a ball, terrified to the core. I don't know how long I cried. When the light was turned on, I found that my uncle had returned home. His face looked terrible. He sat on the floor for a long time, and finally couldn't hold back from asking where my stepmother and brother had gone. I cried and said they had left, begging my uncle to bring them back. "Sonny, you don't have a mother anymore." Uncle patted my head and let out a long sigh. From that day on, besides smoking, Uncle started drinking again. It was as if he had suddenly given up on everything, no longer going out to work, and spending whatever money he had on gambling. If he won, he would give me a handful. If he lost, his face would turn so gloomy it was almost unbearable. When he drinks too much, sometimes he holds me and cries, and sometimes he hits me, never letting go no matter how much I scream. But when he sobers up, he feels very regretful, holds me and says, "I'm sorry," and buys me lots of snacks. I'm not afraid of my uncle hitting me. What I fear more is when he owes too much money and suddenly runs away. The debt collectors didn't hit me, but they took everything they could from the house, not even sparing the rice in the storage jar. Alone at night, I was so afraid, I was so unbearably hungry, and with not a bite of food to be found in the whole house, I went to the village dump to scavenge for something to eat. Unfortunately, everyone was very frugal, and all I could find was spoiled rice, the kind they fed to dogs. The big black dog bared its teeth at me as I approached, but I wasn't afraid. I picked up the spoiled rice from the ground and stuffed it into my mouth, only to find it was incredibly sour. I was eating with such gusto that I didn't expect someone to call my name. "Sonny, what are you eating?" My stepmother snatched the bowl right out of my hand. Her chest heaved with emotion before she finally asked, "Sonny, would you be willing to come with me?" She looked so nervous, as if afraid I might refuse her. I nodded vigorously and tightly grasped her hand. My stepmother came back to finalize the divorce with my uncle. My uncle was willing to divorce, but when she tried to take me away, he got angry. "Sonny has me, and her own parents. She has nothing to do with you. You want to take her away? Are you out of your mind?" My uncle threw back at her the very words she had said to my brother, but this time, my stepmother snorted coldly. So you want her to follow you and eat spoiled food? My stepmother slammed the spoiled food I had been eating onto the table, so fiercely that it seemed she was about to shove it right into my uncle's mouth. My uncle's face flushed red. He wanted to argue, but in the end, he could only say, "Think carefully. It's already hard enough for you to find someone with a son. If you take a daughter too, your life will be ruined. She's not even related to you. Is it really worth it? Sunny is my daughter. No need for you to worry." My stepmother fiercely grabbed my hand and led me away from the place I had lived for 8 years. From that moment on, I had a home. I thought it was heaven's compensation to me. However, things ultimately unfolded in a way I never expected. My stepmother raised me with great hardship for 10 years, only to finally cruelly scar my face. I was left with a deep scar, just like hers. My brother, too ashamed to face me, went out to work and died in a foreign land. The stepmother was finally sentenced to 20 years in prison, and within 2 months of her release, she took her last breath on a hospital bed. No, this shouldn't be the ending. This time, it will definitely be different. In this life, my stepmother stared in shock at my gruesome wound, watching as I picked up the knife and handed it to her. I wiped the blood from my cheek and said to her, "Mom, I know why you did this. Aim here, and be even more ruthless." In my past life, it was only after meeting a medical professor that I finally understood why my stepmother had such strange behavior. She was ill. You mentioned that your mother often talks to the air and sometimes says someone is trying to harm her. These symptoms are most likely signs of a mental health issue. Why? I was shocked at the time. I always thought it was Alzheimer's. It's understandable that you would mistake it for that. The two do share some similarities. Why would she develop such an illness? It's hard to say. It could be a family genetic issue, or perhaps she was triggered by something. At that moment, she might have perceived you as a threat, which is why she attacked you. So, she didn't actually want to kill me? I asked. Stunned. Probably not. After she regained consciousness, she must have been in great pain too. In that instant, I felt as if my heart had been seized by a hand and squeezed tightly. After the immense joy enveloped me, what followed was an indescribable pain and sorrow. I began to investigate why she had fallen ill, and the truth left me horrified, tears streaming down my face. Why had I never known about these things? Why had I been so slow to realize she was, after all, my goddess? No matter how much time passes, how could I ever forget the excitement and thrill I felt when she and I first arrived in the city? At that time, my stepmother had found a job at a state-owned clothing factory. Such a job was greatly envied by others, known as an iron rice bowl. Back then, I had never seen city buses or department stores before, and I gazed at them with greedy eyes, unable to get enough no matter how long I looked. But when I saw where we were going to live, I could hardly believe my eyes. My stepmother's dormitory was on the second floor of a dilapidated building, and it wasn't even as big as one of my uncle's rooms. My brother's room was half desk and bed, half clutter, while my stepmother's and my room had only a bed. My brother chuckled at my stunned expression. Country bumpkin, never seen anything like this. Have you? Shut up. My stepmother patted my brother's head and looked at me somewhat apologetically, saying, "This is just how things are at home. It's already hard enough to get a place like this. It might be a bit small, but it's beautiful," I quickly said. My stepmother visibly relaxed. That day, my stepmother made delicious braised pork for me, giving me exactly the same portion as my brother. From then on, I settled down here, and this place became my home. The people in the building were all my stepmother's colleagues. Some of them would glance at me and whisper, but most were very warm and friendly toward me. When our stepmother worked the night shift, my brother and I would go to their house for meals, and they were always very kind to us. However, I also heard some unpleasant rumors. One day after school, I overheard an older woman loudly telling others that our stepmother had an unusual relationship with the director of the garment factory. You don't know this, but she used to work at the instrument factory. One day she came out of the director's office with her clothes undone. TSK. Who knows what tricks she used to get transferred to our factory? Yeah, she's there every time there's overtime. I've seen her sleep her way through the factory manager and all the team leaders. How truly shameless. Such rumors made me so angry I wanted to cry. I wanted to rush up and fight them, but my brother had arrived at some point without me noticing, He held me back, shaking his head silently. Brother's eyes held a sorrow I couldn't understand. This sense of powerlessness and anger must be what he experiences every day. No wonder they came to the countryside to marry my uncle. Don't cause trouble, brother whispered. Mom would be sad if she found out. Just you wait. I took my brother and secretly spat into the two gossips' cooking pot. At first, my brother didn't want to do it, but he ended up spitting more than I did. We slipped back home quietly, our hearts filled with the joy of revenge. From then on, I was completely on my brother's side, which also made my stepmother very pleased. What made my stepmother even prouder was that I had excellent grades. Although I struggled a bit to keep up when I first entered elementary school, I quickly began to shine. I came first in every exam, which made my brother extremely jealous and allowed my stepmother to hold her head high. She always says, "Why study so hard?" But then she holds my 100-point test paper in her hand, showing it off all the way. "It's really hot today." She walks along, fanning herself with my test paper. "Oh, what's in my hand?" "It's Sunny's test paper. She got another perfect score." "Why doesn't my Jason have his sister's brains? It's so annoying. She'll cost so much money for college later." My stepmother's straightforward and unpretentious display naturally earned everyone's envy, making me feel a bit shy. I tried to stop her, but my brother said, "Just let her be. It makes her happy." Although my stepmother's home was very small, I completely fell in love with it. I loved how I could bump into my brother just by turning around, and I also loved the aroma of home-cooked meals wafting through the hallway. It was also here that I celebrated my birthday. That day, my stepmother came home very early. I noticed she had changed into new clothes and had some scratches on her face, which made me curious. My stepmother said sheepishly, "The cake wasn't stable on the handlebars, and I fell off my bike." She bought me a luxurious birthday cake. The cake was made of cream, with a girl with braids drawn on it in chocolate. I recognized that this was me. My eyes suddenly felt a bit sore. Back in the village, birthday cakes were a rare treat. Whenever a kid had cake on their birthday, they'd flaunt it everywhere, making me drool with envy. I wanted one so badly that before my birthday, I cautiously asked my aunt at the time if she could buy me a cake. Sure enough, she got angry. She grabbed my hair, scolding me for being so malicious, for comparing food and clothing with others, and saying I was born a lowly thing. But my uncle promised me that night. I was too excited to sleep. I waited eagerly at the village entrance. But my uncle didn't return until dark. When I finally saw his figure, I hurried over, and indeed saw the cake box in his hands. That day, I felt like the happiest child in the world. I rushed home and carefully inserted the candles. I wanted to make a wish like they do on TV, but my head was suddenly pushed into the cake. They came to visit relatives, and it was the child of my aunt who did it. He held his stomach, laughing uncontrollably, while his grandmother loudly praised her clever grandson. My uncle looked at me helplessly, also forcing a smile. The cake had been knocked to the ground by the child and then stepped on, long since too dirty to eat, but I still secretly ate it. I regretfully discovered that the cake had little flavor. It wasn't nearly as delicious as I had imagined, but now, it's truly delicious. So this is what cake really tastes like. I carefully took a taste of the cream, and for some reason, I still couldn't hold back my tears. I quickly wiped away my tears, and my stepmother said with disdain, "I'm not raising you for nothing. After you graduate from college, you'll have to give me your salary, understand?" I nodded hurriedly, agreeing so readily. "What a fool," my brother whispered to my stepmother, and she tapped him on the forehead. "You have to give too." "No way, I'm saving it to get a wife," my brother said with a look of longing. "Jason, how old are you? You're already thinking about getting married. Are you dating someone early?" My stepmother flew into a rage and chased after my brother to hit him, while I just watched them with a smile, feeling a warmth in my heart. That day, my uncle also sent me a birthday gift through someone. It was a pink pencil case. My stepmother told me to accept it, and finally, as if sighing, she said, "He's a good man." I didn't know what to say. My stepmother patted my head and said, "Study hard. When you grow up, don't be like your uncle." I nodded. That day was truly wonderful. Who could have imagined that just a few hours later, life would once again bare its ferocious fangs. That night, I drank too much juice and woke up in the middle of the night, needing to use the bathroom. When I woke up, I saw my stepmother in the kitchen, cutting something. Dazed and half asleep, I walked over and heard her say, "Kill them, Kill them all, under the moonlight. Her face was frighteningly pale, almost like a yiksha in the night. A chill ran through my entire body, and I timidly said, "Mom, my stepmother." Stared at me for a long time before finally seeming to snap back to reality. She rubbed her forehead and said, "How did I was just making breakfast. Sonny, don't be afraid." How could I be afraid of her? I held her tightly, not knowing that she was already having an episode at the time. A child's time always passes in the blink of an eye. Back then, I was carefree and had long forgotten the strangeness in my stepmother that day. After graduating from elementary school, I entered the best middle school in the city. This should have been a happy occasion, but I always saw my stepmother looking worried and distressed. Later, I found out that in that year, the factory where my stepmother worked was performing poorly, and there were rumors that workers would be laid off. Even if they weren't laid off, their wages would be significantly reduced. The building was filled with the scent of worry and sorrow. But these were the concerns of the adults. How could the children possibly understand such things? My brother and I were bickering and roughhousing as usual, until one day I saw my stepmother wiping away tears and realized something was wrong. I cautiously asked her what was wrong, and she quickly dried her tears, saying only that the wind had made her eyes hurt. I didn't believe it. Later, I overheard a conversation between my stepmother and Aunt Wang from next door. Aunt Wang advised her to think more about her own future, but my stepmother just said, "I don't plan on remarrying. Having these two children is enough for me. I'm telling you, don't go spreading this around. Your name is on the layoff list this time. What are you going to do then, raising two kids all by yourself?" Aunt Wang grew anxious. "I'm not saying this to be harsh, but if it were your own child, that would be one thing. That other one isn't even yours. Why are you so invested? Middle school tuition isn't cheap either. Maybe she should go to a nursing school instead, so she can help support the family. Sonny is going to high school and then college," the stepmother said firmly. I promised her, "Oh, how can you be so foolish? Two college students. Can you even afford that?" "I can afford it. You're impossible." My stepmother and Aunt Wang parted on bad terms, and I finally realized belatedly what a huge trouble I had caused for my stepmother. During that period, my stepmother was in a very bad mood. Coming home from work every day to do chores, she was doing envelope sealing work, earning 5 cents per stack. Looking at the silver strands in my stepmother's hair, my heart ached. I realized belatedly how selfish I was as a child, yet how terrified I was of being abandoned again. If I become a useful person, I won't be discarded, right? But how do I do that? Before I could figure it out, something even more distressing for my stepmother happened. My brother was great at sports, but his grades just wouldn't improve. The teacher spoke to my stepmother, saying that with his current performance, he wouldn't be able to get into college and would be better off learning a trade. After talking with the teacher, my stepmother came home feeling utterly dejected and, in a fit of anger, gave my brother a beating. My brother covered his butt and said, "I just can't learn, and it's no use even if you force me to death. Who are you calling old man?" My stepmother roared. That day, my brother's butt was beaten black and blue, but my stepmother also came to accept that he might not be able to go to college. She placed all her hopes on me. I said there was no need for the tutoring classes at school, but she always gritted her teeth and signed me up anyway. Yet she had no idea how much pressure this put on me. So, I took the initiative and said I wanted to go back to the village to pay New Year's respects to my uncle. If my uncle gives me lucky money, my stepmother might feel a little less burdened. I thought shyly. My stepmother agreed. She accompanied me back to the village for the New Year's visit. But we unexpectedly ran into my biological mother. I saw her proudly holding a little boy's hand while talking to my uncle. My mother told my uncle that it wasn't right for him to always be without a woman or children, but my uncle simply couldn't be bothered to respond. "You'll have to rely on Jack to take care of you when you're old." My mother patted my brother's head. That gentle expression was the mother I had always imagined, but such tenderness was not meant for me. As I thought this, a sharp pain pierced my heart. When my mother saw me, her expression instantly changed. She hurriedly grabbed her brother's hand and left, as if I would chase after them. "Dad," I smiled at my uncle, pretending not to have seen her. I wouldn't feel the slightest bit of sadness for her. That time, my uncle gave me a red envelope, but it still couldn't solve our predicament. So, I started paying attention to the small ads on the streets and finally found a job serving fruit platters at a KTV. The boss said I only needed to work 2 days every weekend, and I would get 50 yuan per day. 50 yuan. How many envelopes would my stepmother have to glue to earn that much? I eagerly agreed, pretending to go to school on weekends when I was actually preparing to go to work. When my stepmother asked me why the school suddenly had classes, my face flushed. I'm not good at lying, and I stammered, unable to speak. Her tone gradually grew stern. What exactly are you going to do? When she found out I was going to a KTV, she hit me for the first time. I work so hard to support your education, and what's on your mind? You've let me down so much. She kept spanking me until her palm was bright red and I was crying uncontrollably. When she realized I wanted to make money, she froze. She raised her hand high to hit me again, but suddenly let it drop weakly and slapped herself hard instead. Mom, what are you doing? I looked at her in a panic, only to see her face flushed red as she said, Who do you think you are? Why would anyone hire you as a server and pay you such high wages? Are you that desperate to work? After you graduate from college, you can work for the rest of your life, until you die. Don't worry, as long as I have a bite to eat, you won't go hungry. If you don't come in first place in the final exams, I'll send you back to the countryside to farm with your uncle. He's lost in gambling, and he'll just sell you off. When she got angry, even her scars trembled, making her look utterly terrifying. But this time, for some reason, I wasn't scared at all. I knew my stepmother was only harsh with her words. She wouldn't abandon me. I wasn't an unwanted child anymore. Mom, I was wrong. I won't go work. I'll study hard and make you proud. Get out, get out. Go back to the countryside right now, the stepmother said stubbornly. Mom, a month later, the layoff list was released, and the stepmother's name wasn't on it, which gave us a sigh of relief. Life returned to normal just like that, as if nothing had ever happened. Back then, I had no idea that the immense pressure of being laid off had already planted the seeds of many troubles to come. I was only glad that the family's financial crisis had finally passed, and glad that I had finally entered high school. At that time, my biological mother came to the city to find me. I don't know how they found out which school I was at, but they were waiting for me at the gate after school. When my mother saw me, she burst into tears. Sonny, do you know how much I've missed you? You're so thin. Have you been mistreated? Students passing by all looked at me curiously, making me extremely embarrassed. Fortunately, my brother rushed over upon hearing the news. He shielded me behind him, his gaze dark and gloomy. Who are you? What do you want with my sister? We're looking for our daughter. What's it to you? They retorted with righteous indignation. Later, they followed me back home. To my surprise, they were quite polite to my stepmother. They kept complaining, saying they had no choice but to let my uncle raise me back then, and that they had missed me all these years. My stepmother's expression gradually darkened. Later, they tentatively mentioned that their financial situation had improved now, and they could afford to support me, so they would take care of my tuition fees from now on. Sonny, I'm sorry. Can you give Mom a chance to make it up to you? Looking at my mother's tear-streaked face, I thought of all the hardships my stepmother had endured over the years, and my heart ached. In that moment, I truly felt a flicker of hesitation, because I knew I had caused my stepmother a great deal of trouble. If there were only one child at home, would the stepmother have it easier? The stepmother turned her head away, not looking at me, but my brother stood up angrily. Get out, all of you. Where were you when my sister was little? Now that she's successful, you come to share the fruits. How can you be so shameless? If you want to take my sister away, settle the child support first. How can you talk like that? My mother snapped. Sonny is my child to begin with. Your mother couldn't have a daughter herself, so why is she trying to steal mine? I knew you weren't being so kind for no reason. You're just planning to raise Sonny as a child bride to save on the bride price, aren't you? Get out, all of you, get out. My stepmother, who was never one to hold back her temper, grabbed a broom and chased them out. After hearing their foul words, she looked at me nervously, but in the end, she pretended as if nothing had happened and urged me to keep eating. I secretly contacted my biological parents behind my stepmother and brother's back. I poured out my longing for them, which moved them deeply. Then, I would say I was short on tuition fees one moment, and the next, I'd mention wanting to buy a new notebook. At first, they gave me money readily, but as time went on, they became slower and slower to respond. Later on, they found all sorts of excuses not to give it, and by that time, I would say disappointedly, I thought mom and dad really missed me, but it turns out it was all fake. I don't know what they were thinking, but not long after, they still sent me the money. They asked me to return to the village, saying they had good news to tell me. I'm not going back. I want more money. After going back and forth, they really got annoyed and gradually stopped replying to me. I didn't give up. Mom and Dad, don't you love me anymore? I'll be filial to you once I graduate from college. You treating me like this really breaks my heart. Better give me another $50, or even 10 will do. My brother noticed what I was doing and snatched the letter from my hand. He instantly understood and chuckled. You little rascal, you're quite the schemer. I grinned back. They just see I'm grown up now, trying to lure me back with a few measly coins so they can trade me for a bride price. Later, I'm not stupid. I heard there's an old bachelor in the village who keeps visiting their house, and they keep bragging about how they're about to get 50,000 yuan. I'm afraid they plan to sell me off as soon as I graduate from high school. I was so calm that my brother didn't know what to say. He just replied, I won't let them harm you. I know, you're the best, brother, I said, acting coquettishly. My brother's face flushed red. Later, after spending a lot of money and seeing that I still wouldn't return to the village, my biological parents finally couldn't hold back any longer. They sent my sister to see me, with the intention of dragging me back home. I knew what they were planning, so I didn't want to pay any attention to my sister. But when I saw her standing at the door, holding something in her arms and shivering from the cold, my heart softened. After I went downstairs, my sister hurriedly handed me what she was holding in her arms. It was a stinky salted fish. My sister looked at me expectantly. Mom made this herself, saying you probably haven't tried it before, little sister, take it and eat it. The fish had practically turned into a dried-up corpse, but it was indeed a traditional delicacy from the village. But that's because resources were scarce there, and storing food this way made it less likely to spoil. After moving to the city, my stepmother never let me eat leftovers, but my sister gazed longingly at the bowl of fish. Even swallowing a gulp, she said sheepishly, at home, I only get to eat the bones. Little sister, you should eat it quickly. I looked at her chapped lips, her dark skin, and the flicker of avoidance and longing in her eyes, knowing that if my stepmother hadn't adopted me, this would have been my fate. Thank you, sis, but I will never acknowledge them. Suddenly, I lost the desire to toy with them and told the truth. My sister wanted to say something, but I said, only by relying on yourself can you escape, sis. I can do it, and so can you. She looked at me with a bitter gaze and whispered, no, we're not the same, little sister, don't come back. Then, she left. After returning home, I stared at the salted fish, unsure of what to do. My stepmother snatched the salted fish from my hands and threw it into the trash can. I hugged my stepmother. Mom, thank you, otherwise, the one eating salted fish bones would have been me. Stepmother was startled and said sarcastically, oh, why aren't you going to find your real mom? This little rascal is just trying to scam money. My brother said with a grin, Sonny, you're too impatient. If it were me, I'd at least try to swindle a few hundred more. You little rascal, you're all keeping secrets from me, aren't you? My stepmother finally understood and gave my brother a knock on the head, making him yelp in pain. My stepmother sighed. If only you could get into university, then I wouldn't have to worry about anything. My brother is the best brother in the world. He was smart, lively, and loyal. But unfortunately, he still didn't get into college. My brother said with a grievance that he just couldn't get into studying, didn't want to repeat the year, and just wanted to go into business. After my brother pleaded for a long time, my stepmother finally agreed to let him go out to work. On the day my brother left, my stepmother prepared a lot of food for him and said fiercely that if he couldn't make money, he should come back and repeat the year. My brother smiled and agreed, but the next day, my stepmother looked at me and asked, where's your brother? I froze. I cautiously told my stepmother that my brother had gone to Guangzhou to work after failing the college entrance exam. My stepmother just said, oh, and didn't say anything more, and I didn't think much of it either. But a week later, during dinner, my stepmother frowned again. What time is it already? Why isn't your brother home for dinner? That was when I finally realized something was wrong. I brought up my brother's situation to my stepmother once more, and this time, she bit her lip tightly. She stood up and went back to her room, skipping dinner altogether. As I passed by her room, I heard the sound of suppressed crying from inside. I vaguely sensed that something seemed to have changed. My stepmother refused to say anything and worked even harder. The neighbor aunties quietly said she seemed to value money over her life. But only I knew that wasn't the case. She seemed to be escaping something through her work. For some reason, my stepmother would have bruises on her body every now and then, but she never went to the hospital and always tried to hide them from me. Back then, in biology class, we learned about Alzheimer's disease, and I realized the symptoms were strikingly similar to my stepmother's condition. I asked the teacher and found out there was no effective treatment for such an illness, which left me feeling deeply saddened. It turned out that my stepmother had contracted this illness. At the time, I thought all my doubts had finally found a reasonable explanation, so, after wiping away my tears, I decided to respect her privacy and care for her with the utmost caution. I organized everything in the house by category and took on as many household chores as I could. I also deliberately pretended to be casual, repeating what had happened before, to awaken my stepmother's memory. Through my efforts, everything finally seemed to be as it was before. But one day, when I was wearing a tank top, my stepmother looked at me and suddenly slapped me across the face. She screamed hoarsely, "Who told you to dress like that? Are you shameless?" I was so scared that I cried. To be honest, these past few days have been really tough for me. A high school boy has been following me, which terrifies me, so I wrote everything down in my diary. I realized that beauty might bring disaster upon myself, but I never expected my stepmother to say that about me. I saw her chest heaving violently, her face twisted into a terrifying grimace. I quickly changed into long sleeves, but my stepmother still wasn't satisfied. She took out a pair of scissors. "Mom, what are you doing? I've had long hair since I was a child and could never bear to cut it." My stepmother tried to persuade me a few times but eventually gave up. But now, she's cutting my hair as if she's gone mad. Looking at the uneven, jagged strands, I burst into tears, my cheeks scratched and bleeding from the struggle. My stepmother finally came to her senses. She looked at me with sorrow. "Sonny, Mom is sick. If I ever get like that again, you should tie me up." Sorry, my stepmother finally admitted to her illness, but how could I bear to tie her up? I looked at her, so stubborn yet as helpless and flustered as a child, and felt my heart ache with a sharp, throbbing pain. I hugged her tightly. "Mom, I don't blame you. No matter what happened, you are still my mother, and I will never blame you." The injury on my cheek wasn't serious, but my stepmother was still very worried. She took me to several hospitals and only breathed a sigh of relief when she learned there would be no scarring. When my uncle saw me, he noticed my short hair and the scars on my face, and his expression darkened. He gave me some money and pulled me aside. Quietly, he asked if I had been bullied, and I quickly shook my head. "If anything happens, you have to tell me," my uncle said, his rough hand stroking my head. "No, all these years, my uncle hasn't been doing well. He never kicked his gambling habit, just cut back on how often he did it. Whenever he lost money, he'd hide out in another city, but every time he won, he'd give me a share first. This time, after giving me the money, he left right away, refusing to stay for a meal no matter what." I ate the frozen meat my uncle gave me, and for some reason, I started having a stomachache. The next day, I was vomiting and had diarrhea at school, so I went home early. But for some reason, the door was locked that day. I knocked a few times, but no one answered, so I went around to the balcony and climbed over the wall to get onto it. Then, I witnessed a scene that was truly shocking to behold. I saw my stepmother pinned beneath a man that usually so formidable stepmother seemed under his assault, like a small bird caught in a storm. Afterwards, the man roughly grabbed her face, and she said nothing. The man said with a smile, "Be obedient, and you'll have a good life." At the time, I didn't know that my stepmother was being coerced. I thought she had found a new man. My heart was filled with deep sorrow, but I also told myself that it was my stepmother's freedom. I pretended not to know about this, hoping life could go on as usual, but I watched helplessly as my stepmother's memory grew increasingly confused. Sometimes, she would forget whether she had eaten, and after having one meal, she would stuff herself with another until she vomited. Sometimes, she didn't recognize me, questioning why I was in her house, trembling as she picked up the phone to call the police, and when she regained consciousness, she would be utterly heartbroken. "I'm so useless," she would say about herself. "Mom, you're just too tired." I would comfort her each time, yet, my comfort was so feeble, unable to hold back her worsening condition. I still remember that New Year when my brother didn't come back, and it was just my stepmother and me celebrating together. My stepmother was best at making dumplings, and I wanted to help, but she pushed me aside, telling me to focus on my studies, so I moved a stool to the side and started memorizing English words, while my stepmother listened and gradually drifted into a daze. "What do you think it's like abroad?" she suddenly asked out of the blue. "I have no idea. There might be a lot of foreigners," I answered honestly. My stepmother laughed. "No kidding, but once we're abroad, we'll be the foreigners." We found ourselves endlessly amused by such a trivial topic. I said, "Mom, once I graduate from college and start earning money, I'll take you on a trip abroad." My stepmother shot me a glance. "You haven't even started earning money yet, and you're already thinking about how to spend it. As for me, I don't have that kind of luck. If I can see you get into college and Jason make something of himself, I can die with my eyes closed." As she spoke, my stepmother suddenly grew sentimental. She wiped her tears and said, "Study hard. Your mom has no ability, so you can only rely on yourself." Oh, the dumplings are boiling over, I'll go get them. But as I turned to get the dumpling plate, my stepmother suddenly didn't recognize me again. She sternly demanded to know who I was, why I had come to the house, and suddenly picked up a knife and swung it at me. She was so terrified that she wet herself, drip by drip. The urine soaked through her pants. When she came to, she wanted to die. "Sonny, I'm useless now. Let me die." My stepmother's voice was so hoarse, I knew how fiercely proud she was. No matter how difficult it was, she supported us with her own hands, refusing the kindness of the neighbors. Her clothes were always clean and tidy, but now, she has become incontinent. She was so desperate, yet I held her tightly in my arms. I cried and said, "Mom, don't scare me. I used to wet the bed when I was little too. You've just become smaller, that's all." "Sonny," my stepmother held me tightly. She made a pact with me. If she had another episode, I should lock her in the room right away, so she wouldn't hurt me. She didn't want me to tell my brother, and I nodded in agreement, making it our little secret. At that time, I always thought she had Alzheimer's disease, which was why her mind was occasionally unclear. Even when she was imprisoned for murder, I believed it was due to her illness that she had killed her lover. It wasn't until I met that professor that I began to sense something was off and learned her story. As it turned out, there was no lover at all, only coercion. Why is her life so full of hardship? It turned out that when her stepmother was very young, her own mother had run off with another man. Her father was an alcoholic, so her stepmother grew up relying on the kindness of neighbors for food. Such experiences made her both insecure and stubborn, while her strikingly beautiful appearance drew too much attention, which she found unbearable. So, she always kept a stern face, using it as a shield to protect herself. As a high school student, she was assigned to work at an instrument factory, a rare and coveted job. She worked diligently and earnestly, and soon, through an introduction, she met her future husband. This man was a middle school teacher. Though he was not particularly handsome and his health was not the best, he was honest, dependable, and treated her with great affection. The stepmother thought she could finally embrace happiness. But little did she expect her husband to fall seriously ill. Distracted, she didn't handle some of her work well, which gave the factory director an opportunity. The factory director said he wanted to talk to her about work. How could the stepmother have imagined that the factory director would dare to lay hands on her in his own office? She fled in a panic. She thought about calling the police, but she was afraid of the strange looks from others, because, in that era, even if a woman was raped, it was still considered her fault. She also thought about resigning and simply not working anymore. But the medical expenses for her husband, the stepmother forced a smile, found the best doctors for her husband, yet still couldn't save his life. On the day he died, she felt as if the whole world had collapsed. Fate's cruelty toward her didn't end there. After her husband passed away, she discovered she was pregnant. It's the child of that rapist. The stepmother went to the hospital for a checkup, hoping to find an opportunity to discuss abortion, but the doctor said her health was very poor, and she might very well die on the operating table. After much thought, the stepmother had no choice but to give birth to the child. However, when the child was born, she suddenly realized that in this world, she was no longer alone. Even if this child carries a tainted bloodline, the other half of that blood comes from her. This is her most intimate bond with this world. The stepmother kept this secret buried deep in her heart. Stumbling her way into motherhood, she worked hard, lived a difficult life, always thinking that happiness was finally within reach. But the factory manager never let her go. In fact, because she was a widow with a child, they grew even more brazen. The factory director's wife found out about the affair and slashed her face, leaving her disfigured. But this also gave her a chance to catch her breath. In a desperate bid for peace, she hastily married my uncle, only to find herself falling into another abyss. She had completely lost hope in men. But then, she met me. My presence overlapped with the bleakness of her childhood. She couldn't help but want to be good to me, just as she had yearned for in her youth. So, even though she had divorced my uncle, she couldn't bear to see me suffer and kept me by her side. Thus, without any blood ties, we inexplicably became a family. Our life was simple and warm, with everything moving in a positive direction. My stepmother thought that by changing factories and growing older, she could live a quiet life. However, when she bought me the cake, she was still discovered by that factory director. In a panic, she fled back home, and from then on, her nightmare began anew. That guy, whether day or night, would find all sorts of excuses to meet with her. Ashamed to let her children know about her nightmare, she chose to endure it time and time again. In the long torment, her mind had become unhinged, growing increasingly dazed and uncontrollable. When that beast saw me and jokingly said I was very pretty, wondering what it would be like to play with me, my stepmother went crazy. She fiercely told the factory manager that if he dared to lay a hand on me, she would definitely report him for rape. The stepmother's fierce resolve momentarily stunned the factory director, who cursed and stormed off. But from that day on, she was left with a lingering unease in her heart. The more beautiful I became, the more afraid she grew. My stepmother feared I would be bullied, lying awake night after night, so she cut my hair short and dressed me in ugly clothes, believing this would ward off misfortune. She thought she could shield me from all storms. She thought that if the evil hand was on her, it wouldn't reach me. But how could things possibly unfold as she hoped? That beast continued to harass her under immense mental pressure. On the day of my college entrance exam, my stepmother fell ill again. She was sentenced so severely not because she cut my face, but because she killed someone. I later found out that the bastard had run into her at the fruit stall, pretending to need help with the fruit, and then called her back to his home. In his house, there were secretly taken photos of me showering. No one knew when he had done such a despicable thing. There was disgusting fluid on the photo. He once again casually remarked that after the college entrance exam, I would be an adult and could even get married. The stepmother, looking at his lecherous eyes, took a knife and stabbed it toward the factory director's lower abdomen. The factory director looked at her in disbelief, while the stepmother fled in panic back home. That day, I woke up early due to the stress of the college entrance exam. The moment my stepmother saw me, she started having an episode. She mistook me for her younger self, so she scratched my face while reciting lines she imagined her mother, who had abandoned her back then, would have said. She didn't actually want to hurt me, she just wanted to protect me. Her entire life was lived under a cloud of misunderstanding. The outside world believed she was helping the old factory director deliver fruit to his home, that there had long been emotional entanglements between them, that they had an argument, and so my stepmother killed him. The outside world believed that the pressure of the murder drove my stepmother to a mental breakdown, leading her to slash my face. I once misunderstood her in the same way, because, in my previous life, when my stepmother faced interrogation later on, out of self-respect and to protect my brother's background, she stubbornly refused to admit that she had been coerced for a long time. And as for that beast's covetousness toward me, my stepmother also begged the police to keep it from me. In the end, no one gossiped about me. I remained pure and untainted, clean and blameless. In the end, all the suffering was silently borne by her alone. Why did she have to endure so much hardship? Why did I never know about her suffering? In my past life, after learning the truth, I was in tears, suffocated by the pain. Mom, you want to protect me, and I want to protect you too. If I had known what you did that day, perhaps everything would have been different. Now, the greatest regret can finally be changed. Sonny, in this life, my stepmother stared at me in shock. Finally coming to her senses, she frantically touched my wound, then suddenly slapped herself hard. She was filled with such remorse, but I grabbed her hand. Mom, Now is not the time for this. I know you killed that bastard. Her eyes widened as she looked at me, her lips trembling uncontrollably. I said calmly, we still have time now. The sun had not yet risen, and I followed her to that beast's house. Unfortunately, he was already dead. I grabbed his hand and let his fingernails scratch my skin. I messed up my hair and took his hand to slap myself hard across the face a few times. I said to my stepmother, remember, today we got into a physical fight. You disfigured me because of your illness, and you did nothing else. Sonny, what are you doing? My stepmother stared at me in shock. Mom, I'm still young, and I'm a good student, I said, smiling at her. So, we will definitely get through this. After handling everything, I went to take the exam with my face covered in blood. This, of course, caused a sensation, and the police came looking for me. After the college entrance exam ended, they asked me what had happened that day. I said fearfully that I didn't know what was wrong with my stepmother. She had been talking to herself in her room all night, and then suddenly she scratched my face. I fought back desperately, but in the end, it still ended up like this. The deep scar on my face made the police feel immense sympathy for me. This incident instantly became the biggest topic of conversation in the local area, and no one even paid attention to the death of the factory director anymore. Yes, the factory director in my previous life was discovered on the third day after his death, because his neighbor was an exceptionally curious person, but now that I have captured his attention, why would he care whether his neighbor has left the house or not? I accepted interviews from the media, tearfully lamenting why my stepmother would treat me this way, and even said I hated her for ruining my life. My stepmother remained silent in response. For a time, the entire city was filled with sympathy for me. It was already half a month later when the police discovered the factory director's death. This half-month period added considerable difficulty to their investigation. My brother also returned. He didn't dare speak to me. He just gave me a lot of money. He told me he would definitely cure my face, accepted the money. Then, I moved out of the house and completely severed ties with them, because this matched the hatred I felt for them, and it was better for everyone this way. I rented a room and waited there for my college entrance exam results. I was admitted to the best university. I didn't tell them, but they found out anyway. My brother came to visit me and brought me the tuition money. He told me that my stepmother was crying. My stepmother kept rambling on, saying that I could finally leave this place and live a life that truly belongs to me. Sonny, what on earth is my mom saying? Never mind, it doesn't matter. Sonny, let's go. The responsibility for my mother lies with me. I'll take care of her. My brother looked at me with a sincere expression. I nodded. But the next day I went to turn myself in. I said I was the one who killed the factory director. I knew it would be hard to deceive the police, and sooner or later, the investigation would lead to my stepmother. I want this matter to have an outcome unrelated to my stepmother. I deeply regret it, I said frankly. Did he really attempt to rape you? Did you kill him because you resisted? The police asked this, then suddenly felt that even they themselves thought the question was somewhat inappropriate. Otherwise, would I risk my reputation to joke with you like this? I was deeply hurt, but that day, someone saw your stepmother and the factory director entering the dormitory building together. I didn't know about his relationship with my stepmother. I sighed softly. I was also wondering why he forced me to wear my stepmother's clothes when meeting him. I thought he was afraid of others finding out he was harassing a high school student, or that he had some special fetish. My stepmother always wore a mask when meeting him, and our figures were very similar. This was the key to the plan's success. The police continued to ask, why did you go to the dormitory with him? He said he had photos of me, and that if I didn't go, he would show them to people at the school. I feigned an expression of utter shame. The photos from his house would be the best evidence of how long he had been coveting me and planning to assault me. He harassed you, and you didn't tell anyone. Something like that. Who would have the nerve to speak about it? Are you taking the blame for your stepmother? The police officer suddenly asked. She disfigured me, and I'm taking the blame for her. Do I look like a saint to you? I retorted. Officer, I'm really scared when something like this happens. I wrote all these fears in my diary. Officer, how can I be prepared in advance? My diary has become my best weapon, because I never specified exactly who it is that I'm afraid of. The police flipped through the diary and shook his head. You're about to go to college. Your future is bright. Yeah, if I hadn't been targeted by that beast, maybe everything would have been different. Ha, do you think I'd believe you? Why did you turn yourself in, really, that day, after I killed the factory director and returned home? I didn't expect my stepmother to find out. Maybe it was a sixth sense. She noticed something was off about me, I'm telling you. The factory director tried to force himself on me, and for some reason she called me a vixen. In the heat of the argument, she flew into a rage and slashed my face. Now I finally understand why that beast kept staring at me. It was all because of her. Ugh, she's so fickle and promiscuous. I hate her to death. How can she be jealous of me at her age? As if I'd ever be interested in that wretched old man. I never imagined that in the end, you would consider her a suspect instead of me. But I've been terrified all along. I knew my lies couldn't deceive you for long, so I decided to turn myself in. I had crafted a flawless story. I knew that the scandal between my stepmother and the factory director would only make her appear more innocent. The police officer looked at me with an unusual expression and sighed. Your lie was perfect, but your stepmother beat you to it and turned herself in. I widened my eyes. In the interrogation room next door, I finally saw my stepmother. I couldn't believe it. How could something I had planned for so long be ruined in an instant? I asked her in sorrow and anger why she had done this, and she smiled, saying, "Didn't you come too, Sonny? Neither of us are the kind of people who can escape punishment and live with a clear conscience. These days I've come to realize, this is my fate, and I must face it myself. Making mistakes means paying the price. For me, this is a kind of liberation. Before, I was afraid of you finding out about these things, afraid of going to prison, but I was even more afraid of becoming a mother who lies." Through her teeth, with blood on her hands, this time, the stepmother didn't have an episode. Her eyes were so clear, she gazed ahead, silently awaiting the outcome that belonged to her. But how could I let her be the same as in her past life? After being reprimanded and educated by the police, I worked hard to prove my stepmother's mental illness, which took a great deal of effort. In her past life, she did not cooperate because she was unwilling to expose her wounds before us in this life. Because my disfigurement made me a celebrity, I could contact a future famous lawyer through newspaper reporters. Even though he was still unknown at the time, this lawyer had just graduated from university, without the unapproachable aura of his future self, and still had a clear, innocent look in his eyes. He told me, "Thank you for believing in me. I will do my best. Thanks to the law, if a mentally ill patient commits a crime intermittently during the criminal act, or if a mentally ill person who has not completely lost the ability to recognize or control their behavior commits a crime, they should bear criminal responsibility, but may receive a lighter or reduced punishment." With the lawyer's efforts, the stepmother was sentenced to 8 years in prison. I went to college and embraced a new life. During my college years, the stepmother worked hard to improve herself in prison and earned a sentence reduction. I often visited her and saw a relieved smile on her face. No, this time, she has finally come out of it. After graduating from university, I entered the beauty industry and developed a series of affordable and effective cosmetics, earning the title, Pride of Domestic Brands. With the money I earned, I bought a house for my family. When my stepmother saw the house by the river, her eyes welled up with tears. "Sonny, you're just throwing money away." Eventually, all that moved emotion turned into scolding. My brother said with a grin, "Mom, don't scold my sister anymore. She's a big boss now, and we're all living the good life thanks to her. When will you ever be as sensible as your sister?" Then I could rest easy. "How old are you already, and still not married?" As she grew older, my stepmother, like all mothers, became obsessed with urging me to get married. In my previous life, my brother passed away early and never married, but in this life, he found a girlfriend. She was an elementary school teacher, and they fell in love at first sight during a blind date. My stepmother was very pleased and constantly urged them to get married. Year later, my brother finally got married. When my brother got married, my uncle had someone deliver a red envelope, signed with 2 names. That's when I found out my uncle had actually remarried. To my former aunt, I called home, and my uncle sounded quite embarrassed. "I'm getting older, and she's settled down now," crying and begging me. "Well, never mind, we'll just make do like this." My uncle told me that after my aunt was dumped by the rich man, she seemed to have genuinely calmed down a lot. She realized that only her honest uncle was willing to live a steady life with her, so she swallowed her pride and came back. Uncle no longer gambles and has straightened himself out. He no longer blindly obeys his wife. and the two of them have found a stable rhythm. Sonny, don't be angry, Uncle said cautiously. I'm not angry, I replied. It's good that someone is taking care of you. I remember my uncle's kindness. I bought health insurance for my uncle, bought him clothes and health supplements, signed him up for tour groups, but I never gave him extra money. However, I never bought anything for my aunt. This made my aunt furious. She kept talking behind my back, calling me stingy and an ingrate. When my uncle was pushed to the edge by her and mentioned my ear, my aunt immediately felt guilty. When my biological mother found out I had bought a house for my stepmother, she instantly turned red with envy. She came to me again, tearfully recounting how much she had missed me over the years. I looked at her with a smile, watching her grow awkward as she stammered that my brother had grown up and needed a wedding house, or else he wouldn't be able to find a wife. Selling your daughter would get you money, wouldn't it? I said lightly. That damned girl Doggy. She stopped contacting the family after going out to work. All those years raising her were a complete waste. Watching her grief-stricken and furious expression, I chuckled and pointed out a clear path for her. You could also sell yourself to that old bachelor. He can give you a 50,000 yuan bride price, the same when you wanted me to come home and marry you. She never expected me to know about this. Her eyes filled with such fear. I called security to drive them away, and warned that if they ever showed up at my door again, they'd be beaten each time. If they dared to cause trouble, I'd have someone go after my brother. I was that ruthless, and they finally realized I had grown up. No longer the girl they once threw into the trash. They were afraid, vanishing from my life. Time passed by quietly just like that. 5 years later, my stepmother was finally released on parole. In this life, my stepmother's mental state was well controlled, and she never had another episode, allowing my brother and me to rest at ease. I accompanied my stepmother on trips to many places, fulfilling the promise we made back then. 3 years later, my brother and sister-in-law welcomed a lovely little nephew, and I also found my own love. The lawyer who helped my stepmother and me with the lawsuit has kept in touch with me over the years, but he suddenly confessed his feelings to me. When he confessed, he stammered, his face flushed red, looking utterly ashamed and as if he wanted to disappear. Nothing like his usual composed and strategic self. I asked him if he minded my chaotic family situation, and he shook his head. I only feel heartache for you. His gaze was so gentle, and so, we began to date and eventually entered the hall of marriage. At the wedding, who would walk me down the aisle became a heated argument among them. My parents thought this was a great opportunity to control me and resurfaced. They said since they gave birth to me, they should be the ones to go on stage. My aunt scoffed, saying I had long been my uncle's child. She claimed that as his first wife, she should be the one to go on stage, and so they argued, quarreling until it became an absolute mess. Finally, my uncle got so angry that he took the initiative to say he wouldn't go on stage, and that no one else should either. He said they were all beasts, and only my stepmother was the most qualified person to stand at the front. In the end, at the wedding, my brother took my hand and gave me to my husband. My brother looked like he was about to cry, and my husband's eyes were also red, but I didn't feel like crying. Not in the slightest. In that moment, I remembered the girl who scavenged spoiled food from the trash. This world holds so much suffering. Even one's own parents can discriminate against you because of your gender, or even abuse and kill you. But in this world, there are also good people. They care not for the bonds of blood, and they treasure you as if you were a precious gem. Even if they are in hell, they will do everything in their power to save you. They are the gods of this world. In a daze I saw an afternoon. That day, my stepmother was cutting watermelon, while my brother and I were playing gamoku nearby. The cicadas were screaming like mad that day, and my brother was fuming with anger after losing the game. My brother tried to cheat, and I stopped him with a grin, so he took his anger out on the cicadas. He said it was all because the cicadas were too noisy, making him lose focus, and he wanted to glue them all down. But I said, they'll die in the winter anyway, why bother with them? I don't know why, but I remembered the day I was thrown into the trash can and quietly felt a pang of sadness. But then my stepmother came out with a plate of watermelon, rolled her eyes, and said, "You two are so boring. By next summer, new cicadas will break out of their shells. These little things are tough." Yes, the cicada will break free from its cocoon and emit the most brilliant chirp of its life, just like me, I thought to myself, looking at my stepmother on the stage. and gave her the most radiant smile. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time. 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 Next time.